Hey, everybody! Welcome to the first episode of Unlimited Commander. We're here to talk about magic and all sorts of other fun things that we like talking about. And today I'm joined, as I will always be joined, by my fabulous co host, Matt.
Hey everyone, good to be here. Glad to finally get this going and up on the run.
Yeah, so we're trying out a new thing. We're going to try and put a podcast together based mostly around limited versions of Commander, but we'll get into more details on that. Matt, what brings you to Magic?
So let's uh, let's think about that. So my Magic experience coming through, I've been playing Magic for well over 15 years at this point, but not all in a row. Some background on Magic. I actually started playing cards with Pokemon. I was a top level tournament Pokemon player at like 12 years old. Top 10 in my state. Uh, did all kinds of like outside tournament stuff. And my friends all played Magic at the time. Uh, so I tried to pick up Magic, and while I'm playing with them, I don't have any idea what's going on. Like it makes no sense to me. I'm like the rules are really weird and convoluted. I'm like damage on the stack was still a thing at the time, so of course that was a problem. But like I just dealt with all of this like weird conflicting rule situation. I'm just like, I don't get it. You guys keep beating me. I'm really good at Pokemon. I feel like I should be good at this. I'm just gonna move on. Clearly, I'm not getting it. It's fine. And then every couple years, I'd come back, try again with them. I got into Yu-Gi-Oh. I was very good at Yu-Gi-Oh. I did regional qualifiers in Yu-Gi-Oh and did really well. I was top 18 at LGSs. Maybe big fish, small pond situation, but it was a uh, it was a good time to be playing Yu-Gi-Oh. And I tried to get back into Magic again. Same issue, same people, same issue. Couldn't figure out what was going on. I ended up playing all the card games that have ever existed up until about 2016. So if there's a card game that's been out since then, I've played it. And played it with a various level of success in competitive play. But I still wasn't really getting Magic until I ended up going to college in around 2008. When I was in college, I met this group of people who did these huge commander games of 8+ people on Thursday nights. You just go out and play commander all night. And I was like, maybe I'll give Magic another chance with this commander thing. And I got in, I hung out with these people. I was learning the rules fast. I was getting everything made sense. And I'm just like, wow, this is like a totally different experience than what I was experiencing at home with kitchen table magic with my friends. Uh, and I played with these guys in these huge, complicated board states, hours and hours of play on end. And then when I came home after college, I started picking up constructed magic and limited magic. So 60 card and then sealed and draft, which we'll get into later. Uh, but I was really good and I started playing at a really high level. I moved in with one of those friends that I originally was learning magic from. And we started playing magic together and I was beating him all the time. And I'm like, man, I don't know why I had such a hard time with this when we were kids. Because it seems like I get it now. Everything seems fine now. And my buddy looks me straight in the eye and he goes, oh no, we cheated all the time when you were playing. We hated losing to you in every other card game, and we just wanted to win something. And I'm like, what? But why? And they're like, no, you don't know what it's like to lose to you. And that's true. I still don't know what it's like to lose to me. So, I ended up spending my first 7 or 8 years of trying to play Magic completely not knowing what I was doing. No clue. Uh, but I did end up meeting the right group and falling in love with Commander. I ended up playing semi professionally with Magic through the early 10s. And I really got into sealed at that point. I was very good at sealed. I topped a GPT in sealed. Uh, and we've you know we've had pretty middling success with doing that kind of stuff. I've played with pro tour players. I've played with uh, players who are in the top echelons. I've had cool games with other people, and then I found a good tight knit commander community in the past couple of years. And we all play together online, and we do events and charity events and organizations and things like that. We do streams together. We're all streamers and play Magic together that way. And so I have gotten a lot more commander experience since then, and I play a lot and I build a lot. And right here, if I can get them on, here's just a few decks kind of sitting around on my desk doing nothing. uh, yeah, and so I got into Magic with sort of a passion toward building and puzzling things out, and I feel like uh, Commander and Limited particularly scratched that itch for me. But before we get too far into that, Adam, what's your experience? How did you come around with it?
So mine is actually a little bit more of an old story. It wasn't kitchen table magic; it was basement floor magic. My introduction to the game was somewhere around, I would say third and fourth edition. Playing with a friend in their basement, they said, "Hey, we've got this game. It's got some cards. Come check it out." And we were much too young, and the game was too fresh, and we were the only two playing it, so it didn't really take off for us. But I always knew what it was, and I knew that I liked it. And fast forwarding years later, in about 2010 or so, I had managed to stave off ever getting into it. I knew for a number of reasons that opening booster packs was going to be the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I managed to stave it off. But I was working at an LGS, and it's really hard to keep saying no when you're selling these packs to everybody else.
It
So
sure is.
I cracked a pack of M10 and I says, you know what, we're going to give this a go. And I got a Baneslayer Angel. And at the time, Baneslayer Angel was in freedom dollars, it was probably only like $3 or $4. But up here in Canada, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25 Canadian dollars. And I took that and I traded it into the LGS, and everything else is history. I started out playing there on Friday Night Magic tournament style with a lot of the people that came to the LGS, and it wasn't super casual, except that there was a bar right next door, and when we'd close, we'd go over there and play Commander. Back in the good old days when Commander games took 4 hours and there were 6 people, and mostly what we were doing was eating tapas and drinking beer. And that really changed a lot for me. But at the same time, the only people I had at the time were tournament grinders that to play with. So Commander itself didn't really take over. I still ended up playing a lot of 60 card format. And I then moved cities right around 2012. And in moving cities, I lost a lot of the people I was playing with. I tried to recreate some stuff locally where I had moved to, and made some leagues and made some connections at local LGSs here. And I did not bad for a little while, managed to get a couple leagues together and stuff like that, but it kind of fell off. And it wasn't until probably around 2017 that anyone started getting a little bit more into it, and we started getting some commander decks built in a friend group. But as with everything else, like as it ebbs and flows when you have friends that lose interest and gain interest. So I've had a couple breaks in there. But right around just before the start of the pandemic, actually, right in like 2019 is when things started really picking up for me. And I started finding more and more friends to play with, got some of my family involved. And Commander's really taken a big part of my life now. I love it. It's my favorite way to play. I will still play 60 card formats because I know that's where a lot of people kind of exist in that, but Commander is where it's at for me. Limited has always been a little bit of an interesting one for me. I'm not very good at it, actually. For whatever reason, I can't see the forest for the trees. And so playing in tournament style draft and playing on arena now, like I just can't put it together. But a little bit ago, I decided that I had too many cards laying around. And a lot of the stuff that was coming through, I didn't really want to build. And I started catching on to cubing. And I've known some people with cubes in the past, but again, they were more of like a 60 card format cube, or 40 card, I guess is how you would think about it. But I decided that I wanted to build a cube, and I really got into it. And over the course of about a year or so, I put together a cube based around Commander, and that's what keeps my limited itch scratched. I love drafting Commander cubes because it's such an interesting way to interact with these cards that aren't. First off, Commander is about cards not interacting with other cards the way they're supposed to anyway. And then putting them into a cube gives you this nifty little space to try out things that you can't try elsewhere. Uh, I have in my personal Commander cube, I have some of the playtest cards from Mystery Booster. I have, I think, a couple of illegal commanders because they just in when you when you develop a cube, you have the opportunity to tailor the experience a little bit, and so a broken card isn't so broken if it doesn't have all of its partners. So that's really where it's taken me off. I still love drafting, even though I suck at it, but mostly I just want to hang out with my friends and drink beer and eat tapas.
I think that a lot of people forget that the especially with hobbies like ours. So if you are listening to this and you're an old hand of Magic, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're new to Magic or any other kind of card game or hobby like this, you always start in this idea of like, this is something I get to do with my friends. This is something that I'll get to meet people with and learn to enjoy something together with something to be passionate about. That's what hobbies are. They're things that you like that you turn into something that you do more often. But when you do something like a card game, especially if you're doing competitive play like I played so many years, you get lost in the sauce of this idea that it ends up being about the game. It's no longer about the social interaction, it's about playing this thing to the highest level in which you can play it. And you know that you've lost your connection with it in a positive way when you aren't paying attention to the names of the people you're playing against, or what their face looks like, or what their decks do, or what their life story is. And instead, you're way more concerned about, what am I drawing turn 3? How am I going to trip off this Rube Goldberg device of things? Getting back into Commander is one of the best ways of resetting that initiative, because now I feel like I'm back in that area, like you said, drinking beer and eating tapas. I feel like I can go hang out even when I'm on a stream with people where people are watching whether or not I'm doing well in a game, and I can still just sit there and be like, I want everyone in chat to start saying rigged from the beginning because this game was rigged from the beginning. Get them hyped, get everybody involved. Just have people shouting things at each other or talking about, their history, their lives, and the things that are important to them while playing this dumb game that we all enjoy at a level that we all like to play at. And so that social aspect is so important to why you should do something like this to begin with. And I think that that is a big reason why we like to combine these two different formats. So, just for a little background for people who are listening to this and maybe have no idea what's going on, hi, welcome to the show and welcome to Magic. Uh, I'm just going to give you a brief layover on the different things that we're going to be talking about, since this podcast is going to talk about things that don't usually go together: sealed, limited, and commander. So commander is constructed format, which just means that you build your deck yourself. And you have access to almost every card in the game, tens of thousands of cards at this point. And you get to build a 100 card deck. Each card has to be different, and it centers around a particular card called a commander. That card gets to stay out all the time so that you can use it whenever you want to. And the rest of your deck is sort of themed around whatever that Commander does. So that is Commander and one way to play a 4-player, very social aspect of the game. Limited means that exactly what it says. The card pool that you are playing in is limited. You're not allowed to use everything from everywhere. You're often restricted to maybe a set, maybe a curated grouping of cards, like the cube that Adam mentioned earlier. Maybe you're playing with a certain number of packs and everybody has to share from those packs. That's called a draft. We'll get into the nitty gritty on that another time. But no matter what, you are playing a game where you are starting with limited resources and then you have to construct what you're doing based on those limitations. So much more limited feel, like much more narrow focus than what you normally have. But it ends up creating a curated experience that you may not get in the wider branching of constructed formats, if that makes sense.
Well, it makes good sense to me, but maybe that's because I'm in it myself. So, like as Matt had mentioned, we have a few different ways, and why we're going to be focusing in on a couple. If you're here, you probably know what Commander is, and Matt had a really clear explanation of it. But what we like to think about is how can we make the experience a little bit more unique. As Matt said, he likes building a lot. I like building a lot, and what you end up doing when you build a lot is you end up finding yourself walking down a lot of similar paths and taking a limited approach to some of these things. As we have said, is there going to be a couple of different ways to do so. You end up challenging yourself a little bit and finding new ways to do things that you would normally want to accomplish in your deck builds, but you have to be ready to try new things. And you find these in things like, as again, it's probably going to be a strong theme. We like cubing in general. I personally really like cubing, but there's just a couple other ways to do it. As Matt said, like you can have draft sets that were specifically made by Wizards, and honestly, any other card game company, they all have some way to draft stuff. But Commander Legends, they've had a couple like that. Battle Bond was kind of an interesting take on a similar concept.
Mm-hmm.
So Wizards has seen that there's a want for multiplayer draft, and they've given a couple of options. We also see things that have come up. I know that our godfather Sheldon Menery is a big fan of boxing leagues, and Matt, you've tried to do some yourself.
I have.
Yeah, where you end up taking a box of Magic, 36 booster packs, crack them open, and you and several other friends who have done the same end up building a little bit of a tournament structure around building decks just out of the boxes you've opened, which is kind of like a really exploded way of a pre-release.
Yeah, kind of. So for the idea of it, when you do a pre-release, you usually get like 6 packs, and it's 6 packs of whatever the new set is, the one that's coming out soon, hence pre-release. Uh, and you take those 6 packs and you build your deck based on the cards that specifically come from that pack. You can add whatever basic lands you need in order to finish things out. This is a format that is normally 40 cards. So it's a very small pool, but you also have to build a very small deck. If you think about the fact that you're growing 16 to 17 lands, you're only putting like 23 cards in the deck that are from the 45 cards that you get. So you're only using about half of them at most. And that gives you such a weird, like, tight knit that, sorry, 45 is draft, it's 90 cards, but whatever, it's the same difference. But with those 90 cards, building a 23 24 card deck really makes you think about these various like structures of like, how can I try to compete with other people who also only opened up 6 packs, and finding the ways that your deck can work and synergize even though you don't have access to a whole thing. Then you go into something like Boxed Commander, where it's the same thing, except instead of 6 packs, you get a whole box, 48 packs, 36 packs?
36.
36 packs. 36 packs, and you have to build a full commander deck out of it. So it still has to be singleton. It still has to be uh, follow the rule of commander, where all the cards have to be the same color as your commander's commander identity. But you've got to do 100 cards out of it, and you may not have gotten 100 good cards. In fact, you likely didn't. You likely, even if you're talking from sealed, which we'll talk about that another time, but like the sealed idea of what a good card is very different than what a good card is in constructed. You know, like you'll look at a card that in constructed, you'd be like, I would never run this. I would never play this card in a million years. You're like, this is a bomb. I'm going to win because of this 8 cost 6/6 with trample. And you have to apply that to Singleton Commander, which is a wild change of thought process when you are building into Commander. So that is the kind of stuff that we kind of want to touch on and get you involved in with us, through stories, through whatever happens to be going on, or just information that we can pass on to you that will get you to be able to do this with your friends and build an experience out of it. Now, we will say off the bat, Box Commander, it's a little pricey in terms of entry level, because if you buy a full box is in America generally around $100, $110, goes up and down all the time. And if you do it with even more expensive boxes, older boxes, or things like double masters where they have special things going on, it's even more money, 200, 300, whatever, $100. And that's a lot of money for one person to put into one deck that they're not going to use for the rest of their lives, So remember that this particular format is not for uh people who do not want to put in an expense. There is always ways of simulating the experiments for cheaper, which we'll get into in probably another episode. But just know that if you want to do this hands-on, real, everybody grab a box and do the thing, it's investment. But it's investment in your good time. So try to think of it that way.
It's very true. And I mean, the nice part is that you do get to own all those cards afterwards. But it's, again, like, well, so while this is likely going to focus on some of these things, because when you make a podcast, you have to find a reason to exist. And this is our reason to exist. But the long and short of it is that, as you've heard, Matt and I are very entrenched players. We have a lot of interest in this game. It has a lot that brings us joy. And while we will find many, many, many things to talk about that are going to still fall within this range, we're going to want to talk about other crap. Apparently, when you make your own show, you get to do whatever you want. So we will still have other things that we're going to want to talk about. They'll come up. We'll be honest with everybody when it's going to be an episode that maybe doesn't follow the same regimen, if that's what you're here for. But we're going to want to talk about other things. There's a lot about this game that brings us joy. What those are, we don't know. I'm just prefacing it now so that if it shows up down the line, I could say, I warned you.
Yeah, we want you to be ramped up so that when we go on a 35-minute tangent about tangerines, you knew that this was coming. You signed up for this. So just be ready for those kind of things.
Absolutely. Tangents, both as whole episodes and in the middle of one. But a lot of what we're hoping to show everybody is how you can still have fun with these weird things in Commander. Again, as we've talked about, we have lots of joy that has been brought to us by these other formats and where they intersect with Commander. So we'll try and give as much information as we can as we go along about things like how to build your own cube, what are good sets to do a box Mander out of, and maybe as more of them get released, they get reviewed all the time. So it might be a little bit harder with, say, like a Commander Legend set from days of yore to really go into why you should do it. It's on the box.
Mm-hmm.
You know why. It's written in the title. As a matter of fact, like Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate is probably, what is the whole title of it? Right? Forgotten Realms, Battle for Baldur's Gate. Like, it's...
Yeah. Adventures in the Forgotten Realm, Battles for Baldur's Gate, the movie, the game, the
Yeah.
box,
So,
the experience.
but as new ones come out, as they will, because Wizards has shown an interest in doing this as well, we'll try and touch on those. But I also see us looking at like other sets and seeing if they would be good to do as a Commander Legends type set, where you can still draft it with your friends in a Commander environment. And largely, we're gonna try and see what we can do to expand all this into other ways of content. I like playing as much as I like talking about it. So, and I know Matt does too. Sorry.
Absolutely. I mean, like the thing about that kind of play, though, right, is that we always run into these moments where we're like, how can we make things more interesting, right? I think every player who plays any format will do that. It's like we can. There's one way is just to make it harder, right? Which is what competitive play does. It's like how do I make this more interesting? Well, I'm going to put you up against people who are roughly as good or better than you, and you'll see, we'll make it more interesting to see who in the room is the best. That's a competitive aspect of it. With a casual aspect, though, you can't just ramp it up and make it harder, because then all you've done is turn it into a competitive thing. So these limited ideas are usually ideas of making things more interesting without necessarily turning into high level CDH players and trying to make everything as competitive as it can possibly be.
We've all been we've all been victim to that. I know that each of us has had that moment where we realized maybe we should probably tune this down a little because it's a little bit too hot for the pods we're playing in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing that I really like about it is that, as you said, like when you're playing in a competitive environment or even a constructed environment of any regard, usually you find yourself tuning up to make things more interesting. Whereas like a limited way of playing really levels the playing field.
Mm-hmm.
You get more interesting plays because you're having cards interact in a way that they wouldn't normally be found together without turning it to the point where everybody's trying to have a race of arms.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that if every card sucks, then everybody's playing with bad cards and you just have to figure it out from there.
For sure. I think especially when it comes to like uh, the limited formats, draft and sealed, um, you are doing work that isn't done in constructed, because in constructed, deck building is usually not that much of a factor. When you're playing standard or modern, if you're playing standard or modern and you've got any amount of competitive aspect to you, you're looking up decks. You're trying to find out what already is working. You've already, found the deck that 90% of people are trying to play. So you are building that deck, or you're building the deck that works against that deck. And very little of what you're doing has to do with your creativity in finding the right cards to use. In sealed and in draft, that's all it is. Like, there is still a good portion of how you play that is a factor, but more often than not, it's how do you read what's going on? Have you uh, paid attention to what your opponents might be picking up and what's open, so that you can get the right cards for whatever you want to build? And then your deck building is 90% of your actual moment of triumph, right? And so this mixed with Commander always makes me feel good, because it's like, even if you aren't doing something like sealed or boxing leagues with Commander, or doing cube drafts with Commander, there are other ways to limit your experience too that will add fun to that, like making themed decks, building toward commanders that you don't see in every pod that you've ever seen all over the place. Picking up old commanders that people have never seen before, and then limiting the kind of cards that you can put into it. Recently, Adam and I were on a stream where one of the players brought a deck that was based off of a deck that he played in Adam's cube, and he played these two commanders together. He was like, This is fun. I love this. And then he built a deck, and it was entirely pauper. It was only commons in the deck. Another restriction that no one put on him. No one told him, hey, you have to build it with only commons. He chose that life. And it was fun. He played cards that a lot of us haven't seen in either a really long time or ever.
Yep.
And it didn't matter if you won or lost. That wasn't the point. The point was that he brought something interesting to the table. And that's what happens when you allow yourself restrictions in something that may usually be unrestricted.
Mm-hmm. And these are some of the stories that we're going to find as we work through some of these topics, because we play a lot. And so we're going to have stories that reflect a lot of this. And I'm looking forward to sharing all of this with you going forward in our future episodes. So thank you for coming to hang out with us on our first episode. Hopefully it was pretty good, because I'm new at this and Matt's old at this, but telling me how I should be doing it in the background. So thank you, Matt. Thank you for coming to join me on this adventure. I'm super looking forward to it. And Matt, where can people find you?
Obviously, if you want to find me, first off, make sure that you check out this podcast. Make sure you like it. Find it in your podcast files so that you can do stuff. You can also find me on knowledgepoolmtg.com, where you can find my Twitch, my Twitter, my YouTube, and eventually my Moxfield, where you can go look at the crazy decks that I build. I make funny haha videos on the internet other than this, so keep watch.
Thanks. And I'm Adam, also known as Adamus_Prime86 on the internet, anywhere you find internet stuff. I stream pretty regularly on Twitch and also post really bad takes about Magic on Twitter. So you can find us there, and you can find us here at Unlimited Commander next time. Thanks for coming. If you liked what we had to say, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support goes directly to growing and improving the show.
You can also like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Make sure to comment or leave a review. The cast can also be found on Twitter at Unlimited Commander.
You can find Matt's Twitch, Twitter, and other YouTube projects at knowledgepoolmtg.com.
And Adam can be found on Twitch and Twitter at Adamus_Prime86.
Our theme song is Polaroid by Harris Heller, licensed by Creative Commons.